danger, fear. These are just unbelievably powerful stimulators. I mean, an awful lot of people who have motivation problems, and it's usually just sterility in life in general. Like my problem was I dropped out of college and I was sleeping on a mattress and I couldn't do anything else. I was fucked. I was like, I had nothing else. I had one direction I could go, you know? And productivity was hard. I fucked up loads of times. But more fundamental than that is that buzzing anxiety about, like, have you thrown away the ship so you can't go home? This type of thing. Like a fighter, it's very hard to find a fighter who's not motivated. You go into a boxing gym and if you're lazy, someone's going to give you brain damage. And all of a sudden your body just solves productivity problems.
Uber Boyo, welcome to the Metagame.
How are you doing, sir? What's going on? How's life?
Thucydides said the society that separates its scholars from its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. What do you mean by that?
Well, we're getting right into the meat of things, aren't we? We're getting right into the meat of things. I guess, I don't know, immediately what comes to mind is one of my big shticks. One of the guys I'm always banging about is Carl Jung. And he's constantly saying that you must become an individuated man. Isn't that the take? And to be an individuated man is a very, very difficult thing to figure out because you're basically playing this video game. And as Jung would phrase it, you have your shadow or your opposites. And of course, Jung inconveniently says, your shadow and your opposite is something that you can't see. You're not aware of. You're not conscious. It's in your unconscious, as they say. So it's outside your field of awareness. So you go out into the world, and if you want to upgrade your character and become the most developed person you can, you have to go and integrate your opposites, as he says. So the channel that I run, for everybody who's listening, I run a channel called Uber Boyo. And a while ago, I realized that a lot of people I was speaking to were exactly like me. They were creative people. And the creative person sort of goes through this process of individuation. So you start out and you have all these traits, creativity. You're very open-minded. You're very open to new ideas. This is very interesting politically as well, because I think an awful lot of us were like this, where you might even describe us as like extremist liberals. You know, we're all like Russell Brand type characters, and we have these big open ideas, and we're really open to the big concepts and all this type of stuff. But then we lack all these things, like being lost in this childlike world of the imagination is usually going to turn you into the typical artist. And the artist is broke, doesn't understand reality, can't get organized, not in their body, addicted to heroin, all these type of things. Now, this is sort of like an archetype or a character you're given. It's like, to be the artist, that's what you're going to be: broke, stuck in a mattress somewhere, making shit art, being a loser and all this. But that's obviously not true. That's not really exactly how it works, because you could theorize an artist who's creative, but also takes that creativity and grounds it in organizational skills. So this would be like an artist who goes to his opposite type of character. And then he's a different man altogether, you know? And you actually look at like Supermen from throughout history, and they were the characters like this. Napoleon, you know, super creative, wrote novels, big open-minded genius guy. Alexander the Great, same, like, believed in the big ideas, but was also highly organized and grounded. Alexander, you know, really understood logistics and would always talk about the importance of that to run an army. And like, it's his big dreams about taking over the world and becoming the most famous man who ever lived was grounded in, can I supply food to my army? And Napoleon's the same, like the army marches on its stomach and all this stuff. And so you start to see there's an integration of this creativity into something grounded. And then the same as integrating the ideas world into something that is physical. You see this an awful lot. So this archetype we're given today of the modern academic is the guy who goes and embraces his nerd instinct and becomes like a book coper, and he goes and starts to read an awful lot of books and all this type of stuff. But it's like almost the same as the broke artist. It's like, that's a shitty rendition of what your potential could be. Instead, you could go and hit the gym and lift and become massive and jacked and badass and learn to fight, and then go and actually learn all that stuff as well. And there's these weird interactive effects, crossover effects between these, because you go and you learn jiu-jitsu, and it will actually educate you in the meaning of intelligence and sophistication and chess and strategy. And so these physical practices will enhance your intellectual practices and make you a whole person. And what you finally realize when you study something like philosophy, or specifically if you go about it properly with the likes of Nietzsche and all this, that pretty much all of these characters say this. Like Socrates would say that your body should be preordinate. Plato was a wrestler. Nietzsche was big on the body. Jung is speaking about these type of things as well. And the whole warrior philosopher is actually the correct archetype to be aiming at, not the sort of decrepit guy in a French coffee shop being a weirdo writing about existentialism and all this stuff. So I think that's maybe my short take on that. And that was an attempt at short.
I wanted to start with that quote because I think that quote is the most compressed way that I can represent what I think you're up to. It seems to me that you personally are trying your best to embody the wisdom of Thucydides. Like, you're obviously a very scholarly, erudite, storyteller, creative type person. But I also know that you train. I know you do boxing, and I've seen you triple the circumference of your neck in the last 3 years. Just kidding. And I think none of this.
I don't think
none of this seems to be by accident, as you just hinted at, right? You're not boxing just because it's fun. This all seems to be the practical outcome of a very coherent personal philosophy that is obviously very strongly influenced by Nietzsche. So I'd love to dive in more into what that philosophy is. But first, what was it that set you on this journey? Was there an event, an inflection point in your life where all of this kind of clicked, where you wanted to integrate your shadow, you wanted to become like the warrior philosopher?
No, the intellectual stuff actually had very little help. Like, it didn't really do much at all. It didn't really like have that much of an influence. It was more like I'll explain where maybe Jung and Nietzsche and philosophy really helped me, but that came actually later. So I think primarily I was just good at listening to my gut. Like, that's really what it comes down to. So when I went into school, I went into college, I should say. I entered into college and I had a very sort of basic feeling that I was not good enough. And I think all young guys to some extent have this feeling. This is why, 80% of the content consumed by women is like related to their looks and their sexuality, whereas 80% of the online content consumed by men is related to self-improvement. I think men have this implicit belief that they're not good enough and they need to transform. And so what you sort of notice when you're a young dude is that you're like, I wish I could be something else. And you might even look at your heroes like Conor McGregor, although he's not really a hero to people anymore, but a character like that, or Tyler Durden, or Tate is a big one right now for lads. And you see these men who've achieved great things, and you feel this aspiration. You're like, I'm not like this dude. I can't do what this dude can do. And so you say to yourself, all right, I would like to transform. I would like to become that person. I would like to become that hero. And this is like, the deep ancient Greco-Roman consciousness returning, the deep Nietzschean consciousness returning of like these supermen are the people I believe in, and they're beyond good and evil. It's not about like, you're not looking at Tate or Conor McGregor or Tyler Durden and saying, oh, he's a moral guy, or he's this or he's that, or it's none of that stuff. You're looking at him and being like, he's a fucking badass. He's free. He's a free man, a free spirit, creative, bombastic, energetic, full of life, fun, exciting, genius, intelligent, sharp, witty. All these traits are wrapped up inside these characters, and that's the classic hero. Alexander the Great, Achilles, all those type of guys, Hercules. There's billions of these characters that have appeared in history. You could just name them all if you want, but this is the sort of manifestation. And I was no different. When I was a young dude, I was looking at Fight Club, I was looking at fighters. When Conor McGregor came up, like, I was like, holy shit, this dude is amazing. I was inspired by people, and I would look at myself, and I would look at I'd look at friends around me, and I'd look at guys that were the cool guys and all this stuff, and they would some of them would be absolute badasses. Some of them would be athletic, some of them would be really creative, like techno DJs, some of them would be excellent singers, some of them would be just really charismatic and good with girls. And I'd look at all these and get a little inkling of the hero inside of them, something that I'd like to be more like them. And sometimes I'd envy them. Sometimes I'd be mad, I'd be sitting there and I'd be stewing, I'd be like, fucking bastards, they're so much better than me and all this shit. But you're seeing behind it this implication of what you could become. And something very deep gut instinct within me was like feeling that pressure, feeling that not being good enough, feeling that envy. And combined with this, I was going through the education system, and the education system was answering none of those deep emotions. I was going in and I was sitting down and I was having critical race theory dropped in front of me, and feminist theory from Judith Butler's theories dropped in front of me, and Marxism. I was learning the humanities, and I was sitting there and I was reading this shit, and I was like, this isn't speaking to me. It isn't doing anything for me. This isn't answering any of my problems. This is just cope. It's just shoving theory into my head, and it's making things more complicated. And this is not right. This is not helping. There's something not right about this stuff. It's not answering this problem. It's not giving me anything to aspire to. And around about that time, I came across like Plato and Socrates. I was in, I was going to college, so I was sort of like, well, fuck, I'm paying for this shit. I should try and make something out of this. And I was like, these books are junk. Like Communist Manifesto, I'm not reading this crap. I just like throw that shit out. I don't care, And then I go to the library. I remember this is a big deal for me at one point. I just sort of said, enough of the theory selling. And I went to the library and I went to the Greeks and I started to read Plato and Greek philosophy, and I read Nietzsche and stuff like this. And it was too dense, it was too abstract, but I could see there's something more in it. Like Plato's very easy to read. It's very straightforward. So Plato was a joy. Reading about Socrates, reading about all that, it was very straightforward and nice. But reading Nietzsche, very dense, but Nietzsche had something in him. I could feel this energy off the pages where I knew he was speaking about heroism. And every now and again, these ideas would flicker up. He'd talk about like Superman or Overmen. He'd talk about Napoleon. And you could see that he was talking, like the only time he's ever nice to someone is when they're like Napoleon, like a Superman, like Achilles, like a free spirit. Like he was giving positive energy towards that. The Übermensch as well. And this was just more articulating something related to that feeling, but it didn't lead to any big decisions. I didn't understand that till much later in my life, and basically I just dropped out of college. I said, this is junk. I don't like this. And I dropped out because something clicked in my head quite late in college. Like I think I was 2/3 of the way through. Mum was not happy with that. And I realized that it's all theory and no practice. Like I want to get better at skills. I want to develop capacity. I want to transform me. And this has actually been proven out by learning theory as I've come to learn it. Like you have different modus operandis for processing information. You have declarative information, which is stuff that you can talk about, and procedural information, which is stuff that you can do. So this would be like me explaining to you how to fight versus me being actually able to fight. I could probably explain to you, but my quality of fighting is down to how much I train, not how much I explain. And so I was realizing very early on that like if I want to improve and become better, I need to develop skills. I need to become better at talking with people. I need to become a better singer. If I want to make better music, if I want to be a better musician, I need to go learn about music theory, music training, and how to apply that stuff in the real world. Songwriting, poetry. I dropped out of college and I went and found all these people who could train me in this stuff. I found certain types of mentors, and some people were teaching me to write, to sing, to speak, public speaking. I went to fighting gyms, learned how to fight, tried to do weightlifting, never got a coach for that, which is kind of stupid, so I ended up fucking hurting myself a load. And a lot of different things. But I went out and I was just looking, had this attitude. It was very simple in my head. It was like, what procedures can I do? It was just very procedural. Like I just pushed most of the theory out of the way and I said, what procedures could I do? And then I would work on that. I would work on writing. Like when I read through Jung, I cast out 80% of what Jung was saying, because Jung's a bit of a jargonite and an awful lot of it is bunkus and crap and not really useful. And I was just scouring through it and I was like, procedures, Carol. Come on now, Carol, procedures. And he would talk about individuation. I was like, that's great. How? And then I would find stuff. He would, for example, speak about dream reading. And he has this particular procedure on dream reading. And I actually just did it. And I started to get into that. Nietzsche was the same thing. Nietzsche has a couple of procedures sprinkled around about how to write and stuff like that. So I just practiced those. And then I'd read them as well, but like it was not that intense at all. And yeah, from there it's just set really good foundations. Like I was always doing stuff like working on various skills in various different ways, and always have been, and still to this day I'm still doing that for the majority of my time. And I think maybe the reason why I talk about Nietzsche and Jung is that stuff is sort of just the big ideas. I think that stuff really, as you begin to see, once all those procedures are in place, it's almost like the ship is running really well, and then it becomes a question, it's like, all right, where are you directing the ship? Like, what's the goal here? And that's the big ideas. That's the horizon you're chasing towards. And I think that's what I've also realized is maybe one of the most motivating and important things for people as well, which is quite important. But yeah, it doesn't come first. So that I think that's maybe as concise as I could keep it.
Yeah, so let me highlight a couple things in there and then add some more to the table. So you mentioned the difference between propositions and procedures. And this is something John Vervaeke talks a lot about, how there's different types of knowing. And in modern society, we overprivilege the propositional mode of knowing, where it's words, basically. It's beliefs, it's statements. And then procedures are embodied actions in the physical world. And one thing that's kind of funny, so I'm a productivity coach, and one of the things that I do with people, I would say like 80% of what I do is about emphasizing the body in how you talk to yourself. Because people's productivity issues come from using propositions in a way that's too heady, right? So they don't really know, they have a project that they want to do and they define it in a very loose way. And you have to define it in a way that becomes as close to physical as possible without it being actually physical. And then that makes you more likely to take action on it, to break it down. But to kind of raise the stakes here, and this might relate to what you're saying about the big ideas, someone listening to what you just said might get motivated to cultivate the hero spirit within themselves. Maybe they want to be more skilled. Maybe a young man is listening and they're like, yeah, I just want to develop more competence. But it's not just an individual's journey. And this is my take, but I believe that a lot of what we're facing right now in terms of global collapse, or the meta crisis, which is a term that people in my circles like to use, like the crisis of crises. You have the ecological crisis, the financial crisis, the meaning crisis. Put that all together, and you have this big crisis that it seems that all of civilization is facing. I believe that what you just articulated represents a big part of the potential answer. It's not just about individuals getting stronger for their own sake, but it's actually our best attempt at facing the challenges that are specific to our generation. And I think you said on a separate occasion, part of the reason why you really like Nietzsche is because you think he has the best explanation for what's going on right now. So I wonder if you can tell us what that explanation is and why do you believe it's the best?
This is an interesting one, because I've been thinking about two things recently. Another side of things has been, I've been thinking about the old Catholic perspective on things, because I look at Tate. Like, I know Tate is, I'm not sure where it's, you know, where the audience's stance on Tate. I'm just coming here to talk about a story that he's been talking about, because he's come out recently.
We talked about him in the last podcast, by the way. I'll just say this quick thing. We had someone who is a Lacanian who compared the similarities between Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, which is a bit of a digression, but just for context, continue. I'd actually even love to go into that, because that's a fascinating one as well. We'll just talk about the boys, you know, the popular boys right now. And Tate is exactly what I'm talking about when I describe this, that he's a man who's very obsessed with procedures. Like, I've been following him for years. I saw him on Twitter. He was on my channel back when, like, he had like fucking 2,000 subscribers and I had like 300, you know. And he's a fighter, you know, and like, to be a successful fighter, you can't escape this style of thinking where you have to get procedural. Because if you're going to be good, you're going to have to train properly. And training just crushes all theory and becomes all about practice and all this type of stuff. And so he's a man who's very procedural. He's very obsessed with, like, you know, like even the way he talks, like money, money, money. But why, what type of man does he become? He's a guy who's like, what's the next way to get money? He figures out procedures all the time in his life. Like the webcam thing was, despite the fact some people would say, you know, unethical, but you can't slight the fact that it was a very intelligent procedure. Like, he saw an opportunity. Everybody's doing this OnlyFans thing now, the grift with the OnlyFans. But he was long before everybody just saw the potential there to make a lot of cash, and he succeeded. Same with the Hustlers University thing. Like, he's a very procedural man. But you'll notice then with the way he talks, he doesn't really talk about procedures that much. Like, he's not a big procedure talker, because he knows that the thing that moves people's cores is the big stories. And so what is he always saying to you? What is he saying to the young guys? And what like, think about how much this is hitting people. I think this is a big thing. You live in the Matrix. You know, he's stealing obviously the mythology from the Matrix, but he's reframing it in a fascinating way, a very smart way. It's like, you live in the Matrix. And what does this mean? It's like, society is constructed out of stories, and these stories are designed to control your mind. And you're like, oh, conspiratorial, but it's like, listen, your mind works with stories. I think I've said this in a recent video. If I tell you that cholesterol clogs your arteries, you stop eating meat. And if that turns out to be even just a tiny bit off, you actually end up poisoning yourself and destroying yourself and damaging yourself. So that tiny little nebulous story leads to unbelievably dramatic consequences through your choices. Stories drive decisions, decisions drive actions. They're a big deal. And so you can think of society in the way that it's constructed. It's full of these little stories, these little myths. You see this with the internet now. All these characters from all these different fields are trying to corrode against the mainstream narrative. I was just talking to someone, and they're into nutrition and movement. And they're like,
trying to red pill people on the wrong narratives about nutrition, trying to red pill people on the wrong mainstream narratives about movement. And then you go into the Bitcoin financial system and they're trying to red pill people on the narratives about usury and how the financial system works. It's a scam, guys, like that type of thing. And it's like you're getting exploited. You go over to me and I'm like, I'm red pilling you on the academic philosophy. It's like, it's a joke, it's junk, blah, 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 blah. You're probably doing the same thing, red pilling people on neuropsychology and productivity. And it's breaking mainstream narratives. And what you start to see is that this mainstream narrative thing is this construction of a web of narratives that are programmed into you via social conditioning, which Nietzsche would call the herd morality, the morality of the herd, the unconscious low thinking of the herd, and then perhaps things like the education system, which is the propagation of state-sanctioned narratives, which tend to be quite demoralizing and quite useless. And Tate comes in and he says that this system of personal, social pressure, herd morality, the top-down education systems and pressures, and the mainstream media and the various institutions associated with this, like medicine, doctors, banks, financial systems, like everything, you know, the entire social structure, the matrix, as he was called it, are full up with narratives that are designed to disempower you and make you weak and make you pathetic and make you not good enough. And it's like, what the fuck? Jesus, Andrew, like that's pretty intense. And he's like, but why don't you believe me? Because think about it logically. Think about it from a Nietzschean hierarchical perspective. Nature is brutal. Nature believes in exploitation. Nature believes in hierarchy. And we have this narrative that we tell ourselves that we live in this free, equal democracy. You know, we say to ourselves, we live in this free, equal democracy. It's like nature has never enjoyed freedom and liberty and equality. Nature doesn't work that way. Nature lets the best lion kill all the other lions, kill all the lion's children, and then take the position as the champion. Nature put every single human civilization that has ever existed into an inexcusable hierarchy. There was a caste system in India. There was a caste system in Europe with the Catholic Church and the royal aristocracy. Why wouldn't that be there now? Why wouldn't that at least start to form? And then you start to get to the very obvious and interesting and difficult question where it's like, all right, the way that this current society has been set up, maybe it was like more subtle and built on incentives, but nonetheless, people have begun to construct the narratives and the system in such a way that it is based off financial exploitation. It's a more subtle, interesting form of power. And this actually is very Nietzschean. Nietzsche says democracy, against its own intentions, will give rise to a group of people, a race of people who will be these timid, good, hardworking Europeans who will be easily exploited because of their naivety. And this will give rise to an ascendancy of tyrants that we have not seen before. That's in Beyond Good and Evil. You can go look that up 100 years ago. And this is sort of what Tate's saying. He's saying the same thing. He's saying, right, what's your situation right now? There's this matrix that is basically bullshitting you, making you unhealthy, making you have shit relationships, and making you sit there and pay taxes and pay all these inflation and work all your life to pay off these usury. You're born in debt. Who are you born in debt to? Like, what? Why? Who are you paying all this? And then these people who are harvesting all this wealth, who are they? What's going on with that? Well, these are the people outside the matrix. And Tate turns around and says, I'm not after them. I'm not some revolutionary. I just want to be one of them. And I'm saying to you, there's a chance now between now and 2030 where maybe you could get up there alongside of us as well. But I'm not here to tell you. I'm not here to do anything, but I'm saying it's real. It exists. There's a way out. All the things you were told, they are not told. They are told how to avoid tax. They're told to go and understand tax havens. They're told to understand all these type of things. They're told they're given the best food. They're given the best health and all this type of stuff. And they're put in their elite schools and all this type of stuff. And it maybe goes a bit extreme in that regard, but it's very interesting to think about. And it's very interesting to think how much that resonated with people. So I think that story is a big story. And that's really what I mean by that's a man who came along and he just drilled on that. He just constantly was saying that. And then, it wrapped into his whole shtick about like join Hustlers University to break free from the matrix. But a lot of people felt that. Like I noticed now, speaking to people, like I've met kids now who'll be 14 and I'd be just talking shit. I'd be out with friends. We'd be outside a bar or something like that. And I meet a guy and he's like, bringing his son on and he's like 14. And I'm like, Jesus, bro, what's going on? And I start talking to the kid and the kid's like he thinks he lives in the matrix. He's like, I don't trust any of this stuff. Like he's waking up. And all these super narratives are getting corroded by this perspective and whatnot. And I can go into the Nietzsche thing now if you want, but I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, well, one thing that's interesting is common across your story and the way you just laid out Tate's story is that your key advantage was that you trusted your instincts and you had a sense of what your gut wanted. And I think nowhere is that more true than for a professional fighter like Andrew Tate. You need to have a good relationship with your instincts, especially when you're being tested in a kickboxing match. And so I'd love you to go more deeper into the Nietzsche stuff. But one thing, just speaking about procedures, I think there are a lot of people out there who will hear the importance of practice and they want to practice more. They want to learn skills and procedures, but they don't have that relationship with their gut. They don't have that relationship with their instincts. So they can't actually get themselves to do it. They don't have the motivation. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on how to prompt that awareness or that awakening in people, but what would be the procedure for that?
Fear. I have this section on YouTube, you can check it out, Nietzsche on the meaning of freedom or something like this. And I do a section from Twilight of the Idols where Nietzsche starts to talk about his idea of liberty, his idea of freedom. Because obviously we have an awful lot of people nowadays who talk about, there's this part of the modern world where you notice an awful lot of things are sterilized, washed down, watered down. So for example, like freedom, we all talk about how much we believe in individualism and freedom. But Nietzsche, like in his brilliance, turns around and basically says, listen, you fucking soft fucks. Like, you don't just become free. You're not just free. You don't get given rights. Like, none of that stuff happens. Like, that's nonsense. And people there chanting about individualism, freedom. It's like, freedom is won. Freedom is fought for. Like, you know, you want to be, and it's like these treasures like productivity. You know, it's like why do you deserve to be creative? Why don't you start fucking thinking about that? Like, why do you deserve to be free? It's like, it's an inalienable right or something like that. It's like, sure, but the people who got your freedom had to shoot a lot of British redcoats in order to achieve that. Same with the Irish. Same with the British themselves, you know? Like, freedom is ascertained, it is fought for. Danger is what stimulates freedom. In fact, another very Nietzschean / Tate idea is that right now, with the kind of, it seems like there's this superordinate global ascendancy of tyrants forming this one world government, as you hear Alex Jones talking about and all that. And it's like, everybody's like, oh, I'm so scared. And it's like, well, good, you know, now people are going to wake up and try to really become free in resistance to it. And you see some of the most excellent, innovative choices, innovative strategies to get free from something like this appearing. Like, the crypto movement is a brilliant example of this. Like, could that have really happened if there wasn't this sort of danger of centralization just looming over everybody's head? I'm not sure. Like, would anybody be motivated to do it? And so when it comes to improving yourself as an individual, you have to look to these very basic emotions: danger, fear. These are just unbelievably powerful stimulators, unbelievably powerful motivators, you know? I mean, an awful lot of people who have motivation problems, and it's usually just sterility in life in general. You know, it's like, well, what's the big thing you're going for? Like, my problem was I dropped out of college and I was sleeping on a mattress. And I couldn't do anything else. I was fucked. I was like, I had nothing else. I had one direction I could go, you know? And productivity was hard. I fucked up loads of times. And yeah, you do have to learn like the procedure of, you know, understanding that in the morning your mind is going to be sharper. You actually have to learn an awful lot about food, I think, is one of the most important things for procedures. But more fundamental than that is that buzzing anxiety about, like, what are you doing? What are you going for? Like, what's the aim here? Have you thrown away the ship so you can't go home? This type of thing. Also then, what is the nature of the tasks? Like a fighter, it's very hard to find a fighter who's not motivated. It's quite interesting going into a boxing gym. You go into a boxing gym and if you're lazy, someone's going to give you brain damage. And all of a sudden your body just solves productivity problems. And like, you'll go into boxing gyms. This is why young men are so fascinating, because I'd see all these young dudes who have problems with productivity, and it's like, I don't think they do. I just don't think they believe in what they're doing, or they don't see the direct risk in what they're doing. So you get a young dude and you send him to a boxing gym. He would go there all day if you would let him, because he just gets so enthralled with it, because it's so exciting, because it's so intense, it's so ferocious. He's just like, where else would I go? I know that I'm going to step into a ring in 2 months. Like, you sign him up for a fight and he's just like hand waving, signing up for the fight. He's going to be in the gym 8 hours a day every single day, and he's going to sleep like a fucking baby. It's not going to be a problem. And he'll just sit there and he'll wrestle and fight, wrestle and fight, wrestle and fight. And you can obviously make him more sophisticated in his productivity strategies and routines, but that general baseline is there. He's driven because he's afraid of getting humiliated and getting fucking beat up, man. And that's those two things. And I think fundamentally connecting with those emotions is a big deal. It's a big part of my shtick as well, but I think that comes before everything. I often say to guys, like some guys come into me and they work like in various programs I do, and I sometimes get good. I just got a dude recently who joined, and he's a 27-year-old dude, and he's he's like having sort of issues with some of this stuff, and I sit him down and I'm like, well, you know, what are 5 fears? What are 5 experiences that would fill you with fear to do? And these usually archetypally show up as, oh, I would be afraid to get in a fight. I would be afraid to tell someone I know what I really think. I'd be afraid to talk to a beautiful girl. I'd be afraid to tell the truth in a certain context. I'd be afraid to be myself. These very simple things. I mean, it's like, all right, well, how about you brush everything away and just build your life around those? I'd be afraid of dropping out of my job and going for something crazy that I wanted to do. And I'm not necessarily saying this would lead to prudent decision making, but it will connect you with your spirit, with your soul, which will provide you with motivation. And maybe you'd fuck up a couple of times and you quit a perfectly fine job, but weirdly it would give you something in the long term that would be invaluable and change everything, which is be an intrinsic connection to your soul, so that you have a more naturalistic motivation.
Yeah, and you just have a more vital life by default, which is what I think people are after. It's interesting, a key thing in that is skin in the game, and much of modern life doesn't really give you real skin in the game, or it makes you multiple degrees removed. So think of an actual fight. Your body, like your literal skin is in the game, right? You could die, you could potentially die. And so that aligns very deeply with your nervous system and your evolutionarily built motivational schema. But most people aren't fighters, and a lot of people don't have anything that resembles that. So the type of courage that's required in most people's lives is not going to be the same kind that comes with fighting in a fighting match. I was talking to Jordan Hall about the 2 types of courage, and how type 1 courage is like the boxer or like a Viking warrior who has to defend his village. And so there's an event, it's episodic. There's a big event, it's crude, it's like a very coarse grained type of courage. It's like you're just jumping into battle. And it's a very significant experience physiologically. And most people don't actually have opportunities to practice type 1 courage in modern life. Like you basically named all like the key areas, right? Like for a lot of guys, it's talking to girls, or for people, it's interpersonal stuff. But even that, it's not that big of a deal. And then we talked about this thing, which it's like type 2 courage, which is opposite in all those dimensions. So it's not episodic, it's continuous. It's like from the moment you wake up, you need to behave in a way that is vigilant in a vaguely courageous way. It's very fine-grained, right? So it requires quite a lot of sensitivity. It's like you're making these micro decisions throughout your day on how to use your attention, how to use your time, whether or not to give into your bad habits or your distractions. And there's no big like celebration, you know, it's not like you're going to war. So it's very difficult for people to cultivate both, I would say. But especially these days, we don't actually have the occasions or the environment, at least most of us, to even develop a relationship with courage.
I categorize that in my head as like courage and discipline. I try to separate them as separate, because courage for me is very specific. It's tied fundamentally to risk, and most importantly, it's tied to that flash, that nervous system. Like if you're not getting your adrenaline, an adrenaline dump, I don't think you're really engaging with courage in the right way. So for example, like people do sometimes say, it's like, well, how can I engage in fighting? And I like to be sort of a little bit blackpilling and brutal. It's like, well, the slaves of the past were the people who couldn't engage in fighting. The slaves of the past were the people who failed. So maybe you should just accept that if you're not brave enough to find the fight, it's probably a situation where you're bowing. You know, you're sort of saying to yourself, I actually don't want it enough. Because like warriors, you know, Vikings hopped on ships and sailed to England to find fights. They were down. They were looking for this stuff. It's not hard to find this stuff if you want it. And you'll see this actually in all, like Nietzsche would call it the master morality. You'd see it in all these aristocrats and higher natured characters. He would even say that like these type of characters can't really become enslaved because they'd rather kill themselves than become enslaved. The Romans noticed this about the Germans. So the Germans were weirdos. Like the Romans would try to go into Germania, the forests, and they would find that the Germans would never, like, you know, the German men would hang around in their big huts. They would send other people to do all the work. They get the women to do all the work, and they just laze around. And they'd only really get riled up to fight or hunt. That's all they'd waste their time on. They were just they were just warriors, pure warriors, free men in the just purest, most brutal sense. Same with the Mongols. It's the same thing. The Mongols never really got so caught up with anything except for, you know, hanging out in the yurt, and then they'd hop up on the horse and then go and fucking shoot someone and then come back and chill. And this is the type of way that they lived. And that's freedom in its essence, is that you don't really do anything unless it comes to, it's a big thing. It's a fight. It's a war. It's a big deal. Same with the Vikings. Same with the you look at the aristocrats over England, Ireland, France. They were all these Norman Vikings who were just fighting each other, just conducting these massive wars. And as I said, the Romans noticed then about the Germans. The German women would kill themselves and their children instead of being taken captive, instead of, you know, being taken and raped and then turned into a Roman slave. You just couldn't really enslave the Germans. Like, they were just like, it was difficult, you know. And then you'd even bring them down, and they'd be like all mercenary, like Armilius and stuff like this. And so there's this sort of instinct inside of you where it's like you're going for the jugular, or it's like a lion, you know. You're sleeping 22 hours a day and then you're attacking something, and it's like that's the type of binary that you're working for. And I think that really ties into my experience with something like courage, is that your life is, you're either going to seek it, or you're just going to have a life that is not really going to be filled with that life force. And I don't think you know, I wouldn't turn around and say to someone, you've got to be courageous every single day. I think you can do that for a period where you go maybe talk to a girl, or tell the truth is a really big one, because that will take you very dangerous places very fucking fast. Or you can go and do something like fighting. But I think you'll have these sort of days of discipline where you'll sort of sink into this like this part of your life where you're just not really going to be courageous. I think you need to be realistic with yourself, and it's just about going through the motions and things like routines and expectation and no risk and, you know, procedure and all this type of stuff, showing up to the gym. And you can think about the way you build your life that way, is that, you know, say if you're a fighter, maybe every 3 to 6 months you're going to have this big moment that's going to require real courage, and then most of the rest of your life is just going to be routines and procedures, and it's building up for that big moment, preparing yourself for the big moment. And I think that can be a very useful way to balance everything out. Like, I don't want to be pedantic and say that, you know, the model that you're using is wrong or something like this, but it's just the way I would model it in my head, is that you'd have discipline and routines that sort of is like the processes that run things, and you must sink into those. And this can be actually very health giving, and then they'll very feminine, very yin, and it's good, like it's useful, it's growth, it's education. But then it'll come to a point where, all right, you gotta go put your best foot forward and understand real risk and jump in the deep end and go for that. And you have to say to yourself, like, categorize these specific experiences and deify them as courage. Like, you know, even for a young dude, like, talking to a girl takes balls. Go for it. Figure out what that means. Telling the truth. In the era of censorship, telling the truth is fucking hard. And there's hundreds of online creators, thousands at this point, who've gone up there and hard said stuff that people are uncomfortable talking about. And very slowly, they've all got banned. They've all got wiped out. They've they've put all this emotional effort into building something and risked everything they had. And slowly, the collective consciousness is starting to shift. And very slowly, these people are starting to get heard, at least their ideas, even though they get fucked up. And this type of stuff is like, it takes balls to do these type of things. You know, that's courage. That's pure red-blooded courage.
Yeah, something that comes to mind here is the importance of not doing this alone, which I think is implied in a lot of conversations. And I don't know if you're implying this, but I've become gang-pilled, which basically means every guy needs a gang. You know, you need 3 to 6 people in your life that you have like a brotherhood with. You know, all great things in the past were done by groups of people who could coordinate. And there's something about masculine relationships where you have a project or you have something that you're aimed at that makes all of this a lot easier. So I wonder, do you have a gang? Are you gang pilled? Do you think about the importance of brotherhood when it comes to living a life like this?
Yeah, I think that's a big deal. And I try to keep this, again, very procedure orientated, because I think men focused on ascertaining something it's very easy for dudes to make friends. So, like, you know, in my real life, I guess, like, the internet's basically wrapped up in my real life, but I go down to a gym and I train to box with people. And, you know, you just connect very deeply with people doing that. So I go down And, you know, I'm the one arm wonder at the moment because I've got a broken arm. And so it's like very, you know, I'm going there and the boys are like, oh, was he going to try hit me with his jab now and all this type of stuff. And so you're just learning. You're learning to do it this way and you're working with these guys. And at some point I'm going to, like, you know, go for a fight again and get in the ring. And it'll be very interesting to see how I come back from this. Will I be able to do it in another 6 months? Maybe it'll take another year. I'm not too sure. So this is me going through that phase, and I'm doing it with these dudes and they're my training buddies, and you develop a deep bond with them because you're punching each other the whole time. And then there's you know, there's other people in the gym, there's like trainers, there's people who are just weightlift and all this, and I chat with them and I get on with them, but they're more like acquaintances. You just don't get as close with those guys. You don't bond with them as much because you're not actually like doing something together unless you start spotting each other and weightlifting together. And in that case, you'll actually start to form really good strong friendships. And then, you know, here on the internet, I'll sit down, there'll be guys I'm working with on editing. There's guys I'm working with on producing like nice animations to start off my videos. And we're talking about art and the art and creating stuff. And it's like we're trying to build stuff, you know, we're sort of saying to ourselves, how do we create new culture? How do we create stuff that's interesting? How do we create stuff that's high quality? And we all work together. And then like, obviously we, like, you know, we make money together. So like, I'm paying these guys out to do this stuff. So we're working together as a team to build something nice. And that's enjoyable. And that's maybe a separate little brotherhood that we've got going. And then sometimes like I'd look around at people who maybe, like there's like online groups, like I've joined a couple of those. I try my best to bring those down into in real life things, which I can then do procedures with or work with people online about stuff, because I find that's the most effective way to do things together, is to just build things together. And then working with that type of stuff. And yeah, like it's setting up brotherhoods is essential and really, really powerful. And I think just the most important thing is to try get it as procedure focused as you possibly can. Of course, there's something very powerful in sharing values, but like I think if you have procedures, it turns into something very powerful and motivated, because you've got this goal you're trying to achieve and you're moving forward towards this. I think the antagonist to this would be like maybe the kind of the brotherhood, which turns out to be like a load of dudes who sit down and watch sport and drink beers every weekend. And it's like, I don't mean to, you know, demoralize that, because that simply is just some guy's culture. Like that's them relaxing, but it's maybe a bit antagonistic when you're a young guy. Like when you're a young guy, it'd be better to form a couple of these key brotherhoods, either your gym buddies that you train with, or the guys that you build something online with, or you build your presence with, or maybe the guys like, you know, I've met guys that we go out and we talk to girls together, you know, and it's sort of like, you know, it's actually, you really bond deeply with them, because, you know, you that's like constant risk, and it takes fucking balls, and everybody knows how intense it is. So when you see someone just like wrestle with their head and be like, she's so fucking hot, I'm so fucking nervous, all right, fucking, and you run up and he does it, you know, you see that, and then you're like that one time, and then you're going in and you're saving him, and you're going like, you know, this type of stuff is very powerful and very important and very useful. And I think the more you can get that clear thinking of like, all right, what are we doing together and what type of goal, and how are we increasing our capacity for will to power with these behaviors, male friendships become incredibly powerful, incredibly fertile, incredibly motivating, and intimidating for the matrix, as Andrew Tate would say as well.
Yeah, so have projects and procedures that you all share. This reminds me of Aristotle. He talked about 3 different types of friendships. There's friendships of utility, which is you're working on projects together. It's friendships of pleasure, which maybe it's like those guys who watch sports and hang out and drink beer. And then there's friendships of virtue, where you participate in the cultivation of virtue. And I think that's like the highest form of friendship. One very practical thing that I've mentioned before is the importance of committing to telling the truth, just making it explicit amongst your friends. And if you just say like, it's implicit, right? Like no one's planning on lying to each other, or at least in their friendships. I don't think that's how people think about their friendships. But if you tell your friends that I'm going to tell you the truth from now on, like 100% of the time, and if I don't, that's a failure on my part, and then they do the same, then those friendships will dramatically transform.
This is true, yeah, it's true. That's a good one. See, again, even because I'm just like kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just like in touch with my feelings, but even thinking about that, I can feel the punch in the stomach, because I know to be that moment where maybe you'd want to say something's annoying, or maybe there's something they're doing that you think they're wrong about, and there's part of you that's sort of like, you know, is there really any need to get into a conflict about this right now? It might even be offensive the way I bring it up, but you're in the back of your mind, you're like, oh fuck, I should just tell them, I should just say the truth. Like, it's just difficult, it's tough.
Did a specific example come to mind?
Not really. I just know the feeling, you know, because you'd be walking around with some lads or something like this, and like very often, you know, you're just like, sometimes you just don't even have the energy to just like start up in a big tirade about like what this little specific thing, and so you kind of let things slide. But then you feel it in your gut. You're sort of like, that was a moment, that was a hiccup of adrenaline that you could have launched on top of and said, wait a second. I'm going to impose some standards here. I'm going to suggest something here. I see something here that I want to comment on, and it's like, yeah, I know the vibe. So it's a good call. I think it's a very, very good call.
So something funny. So me and my friends, we've kind of normalized this now. And this year for my birthday, I asked all of them to make a Google Doc with all my flaws and my blind spots.
Oh,
so like
my God.
I gave them permission, right, to say the truths, and then we did this whole like intervention thing. And then it was so successful and intense that now we're doing it for everyone's birthday. And so we just did it to this guy on Friday, and it was like this 2-hour conversation where we like systematically went through everything that we saw, right? Because your friends see you better than you do. You can walk around your whole life for decades with blind spots that are obvious to other people. Like people might even notice them within 10 minutes of meeting you, but we don't have norms that invite people to share those things. So ritualizing it and doing it every year for your birthday, I think, is a good solution to that.
That's actually such an interesting idea. Like, that's a really, really big idea, because that's hardcore. Like, you know, you talk about shadow work, like, boom, there you go. There's a great example, because you're absolutely right. Like, I'd even think about, in terms of boxing, like when I broke the arm, I was like, all right, well, I'll spend a while getting better with my left hand. So I went and I like practiced a bit and did all this type of stuff. And then eventually I went back to sparring. And of course, my 3 months off, I had practiced a load of stuff that made sense in my head. I was like, oh, that will work in theory. I just get fucking slapped in the face, you know? And you just, you know, the actual tangible experience shows you how delusional you are. Like, sparring is like the laboratory. And you, in your head, like, it's so, and it was, again, another example of this style of thinking. In my head, I think I'm a superhero. Like, I think I've figured it out. It's like, well, of course that's going to work. I'll just punch him right in the face. Like, you know, that's just very straightforward. I'll just use my left hand and just smack him in the face. And then you try to do it and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work, because in your head it's so simple, but in reality it's not. And you just can't see that stuff until you get the blunt force of reality to hit you. And so, of course, it's very hard to do in your head. You could use video maybe in boxing, or get an outside perspective is a fantastic one, or a coach. And then in this instance with your friends, this is just brutal, because they'll see stuff. They'll see, like, maybe when you're dirty, or you're not clean, or your hair looks silly, or the way that you talk, or like slowness to make decisions, and like all these things that you probably even know they're there, but you just don't want to confront them. Like, you know, you just push them deep down, and you're like, oh, they'll get solved eventually. You said 10 years ago, and then it's like, oh man. So that's a great idea. That's a really, really interesting idea.
What sort of things do you practice, and, you know, addition to like training and boxing and stuff, on a regular basis?
What's my life look like? I guess I wake up in the morning. I try to have a load of water, some salt, and ZMA. Then I go for a big long walk in the sun, and then I do some training of some sort. So I don't know, sun walks, is that a practice? I don't do anything sort of mental. I don't do any like meditation or anything like that. I do like absolutely think that I remember doing it before, and it really does help calm the mind down and all that type of stuff, but it's just not really me. Because I find that I love sitting down and being creative. I try my best to keep the phone out of my face in the morning. That's like one big win. Go down and I train, then I come back, eat big fat steak, I'd say, usually, and then start getting into basically making stuff on the internet. I'd try, like, you know, the other things I'd practice would be more just related to the stuff that I like to do. So I'd sit down and I'd write stories. I'd play around with like visuals. I'd play around with like audio. I'd think about big narratives that I can maybe rant and explain in this type of format. I'd make music, like I've kind of tinkering around with my music and stuff like this. And it's more just sort of artistic. Like, that's what calms my mind down. Like, that's my meditation, just getting into the aesthetics of sounds, and maybe the aesthetics of visuals, and the aesthetics of a story, and playing around with that stuff. And then trying to wrap that up then obviously with more admin job things that you have to do. Like, for example, working with clients that you're working with and just making sure that you're attentive to them. And then thinking about logistics for stuff like that, and like setting up workflows and, like, you know, the run-of-the-mill productivity stuff. And then usually after that, I bounce out of that, and I'm either going to be doing something social where like I'll be talking to a lady or going out for dinner or something like that. It is a joy to talk to girls because they're just so different. So that is something that, like, I don't know, is that like something I do? I practice, but I do like doing that. And then talking to, hanging out for people with dinner and stuff like this. So maybe being social, but that's like not really a practice. And then if I'm not doing either of those, I'll sit down and I'll just draw pictures. Like I'll try relax myself by writing, journaling, drawing, that type of stuff. So I guess the pen would be my only other exceptional one. And I can't think of much else. You know, sometimes I'd smoke cigarettes. That would be probably the other vice that would be in there, a practice. And I do, it's crazy, man, but like I noticed with those that you get some of your best thoughts after a cigarette, man. It's something else. So I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
Yeah, I recently introduced nicotine gum as like a productivity aid because it increases neuroplasticity and can give you a boost. But if you take too much, then you just want to lie down. Yeah, the reason why I ask is because practice is like a big theme for me, and it's something I've talked a lot about on this podcast, but it's the process by which we transform ourselves in kind of like a ritualistic way. And something that you were referring to is this thing of staying in contact with reality, you know, whether it's a confrontation with truthful friends or a fight, or, you know, you get rejected by a beautiful woman because you're just not good enough. I'm very interested in finding ways to make that just a normal part of people's lives. And it's not just something that happens a couple times a year, but it's just how you live. Because as you said as well, that also is a pathway to integrate your emotions, your instincts, and your fears. But the thing you said in there that I want to pick up on is this idea of creativity and art. I think you at least partially see yourself as an artist, so I'm sure you've thought a lot about where art comes from and what truly vital, impactful art is. And the thought that popped into my head was Nietzsche's whole take about how life is really justified as an aesthetic phenomenon. Like the answer to the meaning crisis is art, you know, and live life as if your whole life is a work of art. So how do you think about that?
Well, actually, I'd relate it to, I think this might be a little bit of a misunderstanding of Nietzsche, first of all, but I'll relate it to something like as pragmatic as I possibly could do. Because again, like when I'm living some of the most productive eras of my life, I'm maybe actually a little bit further away from that discipline stuff. Like that might be my standard routine. But I can also switch on, and I have to fight with myself to do this, I can switch on this other mode inside my mind that's like a meta mode. So I'd be, you know, going on that sun walk. And when you're doing that walk, there's probably 3 things that are not routine. It's not discipline, but you might see one beautiful girl or something like this. And, you know, the back of your mind would be like, talk to that girl. She's pretty. Like, talk to her. Say hello or something like this. And most of the days you have the very typical thing where you rationalize, or you're in your head already thinking about something and you notice her and then you ignore it. And if I'm really pushing myself, like I'm just trying to work the membrane of fear, I will be sort of pushing myself to just act as impulsively as I can on those things. And I can't really be coded in because you can never plan for it. So you just sort of, I have to like, it's like a spirit of impulse has to be exant within me. And then that generalizes then, like if you're going to do that in a more general way, maybe like, you know, you're married, so you don't want to be hassling young women as they're walking down the beachfront or something like this. Instead, it can be something like, you know, conflict. So like conflicts will emerge quite continuously in your life. So it's sort of like that more gentle or vigilant fear that you're speaking about. And people will say something and you're just like on it, like a bullet. Like, I disagree, or that's not right, or this is the way I think you should do this, or watch out for this type of stuff. So like that type of thing, or telling the truth in some sense. Like when you're talking, noticing when you're bullshitting and trying to be more exact. And this is a powerful mode you can switch on that I think has this great vitalistic power, because it's almost like you get this infinite supply of coffee, because throughout your life then there's all these anxiety driving moments. There'll usually be 1 to 3 of them a day, I notice. And you go and do those and you get this instant stimulus back, you know. And some of the most incredibly developmental periods of my life have just been that simple principle enacted. Like, I'm going to face every single moment of conflict, fear, intensity I can today. And I would usually fuck up 80% of them, but the 20% I do would just be like transformative. You go home feeling like a man, even if you're completely fucked up, you know. It's really powerful. And this kind of ties into something, what happens is you feel all this energy as a consequence. And this ties into something I notice an awful lot with Nietzsche, is that he's very jarring in the way that he articulates what you need to do. Because an awful lot of us as like intellectuals and artists, we want to believe that it's about the pretty ideas, or talking about abstract questions and all this type of stuff. But he's just brutal. He's like, it's just not really about that, you know. Aesthetics don't come from pussies. This is sort of what I guess he's saying. It's like, you can't, like he says this. I'll give the more intellectual approach, but he says, if you want to make a great culture, you have to start in the right place. This is in Twilight of the Idols, and it can't just be you trying to big yourself up and talk about how profound your soul is and saying how much you love beauty and aesthetics and all, like it, or how much you love truth and all. Like none of that counts. What it needs to be is, it needs to be the body. The body must be persuaded. You must be sitting down and working with what you are and creating within yourself this like chthonic vital force, this Dionysian monster of energy that you're almost exploding with creativity. Like that's the true approach. And out of that will come a vitalistic masculine aesthetics that will be the vitalizing art that will justify things. When you listen to like Beethoven and you listen to that, it's so sophisticated. It's so intelligent. Like there's an apex of human achievement there. Apollyon neocortex has produced something that we will probably never see again in that. But also, it's incredibly muscular. It's incredibly aggressive. Like this is the energy of the people who conquered the world, the Europeans at their point of like colonialist chauvinism, you know, where they were like, we're righteous to bring Christianity to the entire world. The world needs to be saved by us. And there's this sort of aggressive self-belief inside of them. And of course, this is because these characters, like the Beethoven Germans, these were the same people who had just burst out of the forests of Germany and were still full of vital energy, you know? And so they still had this like Faustian spirit, as the likes of Jung would always talk about. They still had this chaos inside of them. As Nietzsche would say, you need to have a chaos inside yourself to give birth to a dancing star. So when Beethoven is out there making music, even though he's incredibly intellectually developed, standing on top of an incredibly profound, sophisticated tradition, which allows him to create this height of incredibly powerful beauty, it's driven by a furious energy inside of himself. Like he is fundamentally life force screaming out of himself. And when you listen to it, you feel it. Like Beethoven is just heavy, it's hardcore, it's heavy metal, like it's got energy to it. And it's so interesting then if you listen to like classical music nowadays, especially people who are trying to replicate that type of style, it just isn't there because the vital force is not the same. It's like nostalgia. It's like something, you're romanticizing something from the past. Whereas for him, you know, he lived in the era of Napoleon and cannons. Like that's not the same as the era we live in now. Whereas if you listen now to like hip hop or you listen now to techno, it's uglier music. It's not as Apollonian, it's not sophisticated, but it's got that energy because it's sort of in that nascent phase right now. And so culture is, and beauty and sophistication is a very, very hard thing to get right. And I see this an awful lot where an awful lot of people are like pining that we want to go back to traditional architecture and stuff like this. But it's like, I just don't know if it, the return, exactly. And I just don't know if that can be done. Like if they would call this in the art world a pastiche, you know? Like if we went back to building old architecture, I'm sure it'd be gorgeous, but it would kind of feel not what we are. Like we're not 16th century Christians anymore. Like we've been through the 20th century. We've been through modernism. You know, Fen de Viller is a fantastic person to check out on this. And he talks about how you look at modernist architecture, it was way different. And they had all these like Promethean statues. I'd love to be able to show you. Maybe we could screen share, but they use lighting, they use electricity. The Empire State's Building was made of it. Art Deco is a good example of this. And it's bombastic, it's energized, but it looks modern. It looks like something new. It looks like something with a spirit. And this is because these people in this era still had inside of them a bit of vital energy that was married to their age and their industrial revolution. And so it's maybe more crude than a Christian cathedral, but it's real. It's got the energy inside of it, and it's actually pointing to a path of beauty that could have been realized, but instead we all became postmodernists and just completely fucked that up altogether. So I'm not sure in any way does that answer your question, but I think it's just an important thing that Nietzsche talks about. You need to have vibes, man, is basically to break it down.
Yeah, I'm actually hoping to speak with Fen in a couple of weeks, and just on a very practical note, one thing I've noticed. So I compose music, and sometimes I'll do like push-ups right before I go to the piano. I'll do like push-ups till failure, and then I'll sit at the piano, and then what comes out is completely different than what normally comes out. And I recently heard this guy on Twitter. You might know him, Brute de Force. He's like a Olympic level, or he does Olympic lifts. He's like 99th percentile at Olympic lifts, and he said this really funny thing, which totally connects with this, where he said he would take sales calls in between his sets. So he'd be like huffing and puffing after like doing like a clean and jerk, and then he'd call someone and close a deal, and he thought that was like a competitive edge because his body would be coursing with this vital energy that the other person could feel. And I know that's like a much smaller kind of, it's simpler than what you are saying, but it gives people a bit of a taste for what this is. Beauty and aesthetics and creating art is not about repeating beautiful patterns from the past. It's something that's very present and requires authenticity and faith in your current culture. So if we're just creating neoclassical architecture again, then there's almost like a faithlessness in the present.
Yep. I see this a lot. Like it's a big, obviously the big trend in the culture from the last 7 to 10 years has been most of us moving away from liberalism because we were caught up in the naive liberalism of our day, which is, like it's full of beautiful ideas. And I think, it's the very classic meme of like, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you've no heart. If you're not maybe something else when you're older, you've no brain. But we sort of transitioned away from that, and an awful lot of people became what you might describe as right wing. Like these political categories are not great, but they were essentially dissidents to the culture, cultural dissidents, reactionaries. Like everybody from Donald Trump to 4chan to Jordan Peterson would all be broadly categorized by these, And what really started to form out of that was a fascinating spin on all the energies, because you had some people in there who were traditionalists. And I completely get the traditionalists. These are the people who are looking at the modern world and being like, we fucked up. We fucked up. Like, look around. It's like Notre Dame's burning. Paris is a shithole. Like, this is dumb. Like, we're done. Like, this just didn't work. We fucked up. Like, we have to go back. We have to go back. We must return. And this is the reaction. It's a reactionary instinct. This is how the people in the political game would categorize this stuff. You're a reactionary. They say that like an insult, which is fascinating. It's like, I'm reacting to something bad. It's like, that's bad or whatever. They're reactionaries. But you also see it because it's a little bit like petulant. A little bit, okay? Now, I believe an awful lot of it's authentic, so I don't like to be too crude about it. But it's like, I don't like what's here, so I want to just go back to something that I understand, And makes perfect sense. It's like if you're a fighter and you try this new style and it doesn't work, it's like go back to the old style, like shut the fight. Like Conor McGregor now, he used to be this class, flowy movement guy, and then he got all this stiff boxer, and he keeps on getting beaten up. And so it's like, Conor, just go back to what you were, and this type of thing. But there's also something a little bit off about it, because it's like you're trying to escape. You're reacting. You're being bluntly reactionary. You're not standing on first principles. And so I see this spirit nascent that is like an alternate, it's almost like a counter progressivism. It stands on its own 2 feet. It sees the future. It's futuristic. This would be called Nietzschean futurism or vitalism, in maybe like would be a loose category for what an awful lot of this stuff is talking about. But it's also older than many of the liberal conceptions. Like it's as old as Nietzsche at least, and it's about going in a direction that's braving the future, that's leaping for the future. Whereas the traditionalists, the reactionaries, the return guys, they crave beauty. And they crave the big ideas, and they're conservative, and they're traditional, and they want to go back to Christianity, and they just want to go back to things that they understand. But it's like running to safety. Maybe that's not even the right way to say it. It's they just want things to calm down. They just don't want things to change, and that's like is very close to I don't want things to adapt. And you do need to have that revolutionary creative spirit, have a good outlet in people. And that's what I think I see being born and going in a different direction, having that sort of more like assertiveness, being like, let's go attack the future, let's go do something, let's go do fucking push-ups, let's go do an Olympic lift set between our sales calls. Like, let's go and attack, let's go on the offensive, let's go get something done and build something and create something new. Like, I'm not mad about, all right, maybe I'm a bit mad about the current society, but I'm not saying I want to return. I'm saying I want to take all these trends that led to the modern world and say, how could we actually economize them towards creating something that's vital and energetic and has the potential of manifesting something new and something beautiful? How could we create a culture that discovers the platonic forms of beauty with its new identity and its new personality, you know? And it's like give birth to something new, I think, is the real thinking behind that. So I don't know, can I pull that to any sense, but that's just some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, we're just crossing the hour mark. So maybe as a closing question for you, what are some of your clues of this more vital, beautiful future that you see yourself participating in?
I've many things, I guess. Like, in and of itself, people awakening from what you might call as the slumber of liberalism is quite important. Again, that's very politically loaded, so apologies for the simple terms, but I guess the way I'd phrase it is, again, coming back to Nietzsche. Like, as you said at the start, Nietzsche's describing the modern world. How is he doing that? Well, he comes up with his prophecy of the last man, and he says that the trends, this is a trend analysis. So it's like the gods, you know, the trends that are leading us to our current situation. You have the booming industrial revolution. You have all this abundant food. You see nature's pressure being taken out of things. So we no longer have evolutionary pressure to develop. And this means it's like a body going up into space. No gravity means that our bones get weaker and we become frail and decrepit. And what you see happening to modern man is the transformation of mankind into cattle, as Nietzsche says. Man becomes weaker. His testosterone is going down. This is a very famous thing. His conceptions of himself, the Western man especially, develops this self-doubt and self-hate, this desire to, you know, pathological tolerance, as they call it. He develops this sterility in his creativity. He can't create anything anymore. He can only be ironic. He can only be pathetic. He can only be self-depreciating. He can't proudly stand for what he is and express chauvinistically culture that he believes in himself. That's what, like, you know, all the great culture from the traditionalist era came from that, came from them, these people believing in themselves, believing that they were the chosen ones of God and whatnot. The last man won't have any of this stuff. The last man will be petty. He'll be obsessed about his happiness. He'll be a consumer. He'll go on Amazon. He'll watch Netflix. He will eat the bugs. He will eat the plant burgers, this type of stuff. His beliefs will be arrogant. He'll have the beliefs of entitlement. Everybody is equal just because they exist, because I matter only just because I exist. I matter. I should be allowed to eat as much. I should be allowed to put as many animals through the slaughterhouse system as I want because I exist. And I sit on my couch and I'm a fat fuck and I deserve it because I exist, because I am got inalienable rights to eat that poor pig that was shock tortured by some poor depressed psychopath who's on some opiates because I won't take care of my country. This is the spirit within the modern world, and it's very ugly. It's very low, and this is tied to this sort of liberal Reddit conception of life. Again, even Nietzsche would say true liberalism is just not like look like this at all. You know, like this is this arrogant, self-entitled liberalism of the last man. And all of us kind of grew up in this. Like, we all grew up in this slumber. Like, my dad thinks this way, my whole family thinks this way. I thought this way. You know, I would listen to the likes of Russell Brand used to think this way until about 5 years ago. Like, you listen to Russell Brand now and it's just shocking how much different his conception of life is right now compared to where he was when I used to listen to him. And he like, we all sort of woke up collectively to being like, what the fuck? Like, there's all of these trends just all of a sudden started to bear fruit, like, immediately. You know, we started to see the psychosis. Jordan Peterson stands up and says, like, watch out for victim psychosis and group mentality, because those two things are fucked up. And you're like, ah, come on now, Jordan. He's like, do you ever wonder what happened in communism? And then you start to see many of those instincts manifest, and these people start to reach for power as the preachers of equality, calling for vengeance. And you start to see all this stuff. And then you see these characters come out and say, yeah, we're going to make everybody eat the bugs and all this type of stuff. And then you look at the art and you start to realize that the art is toxic and demoralizing. And you start to look at the education system more critically, and you start to be like, holy fuck, this whole thing is set up to demoralize me, to say that I'm ugly, to say that I'm pathetic. It's slave worthy. It's brainwashing me. Like, I went through college And one of the first books that was introduced to me was the Communist Manifesto. And I was given critical theory that was designed to critique the Western canon. Nobody ever sat me down and made me read the Western canon. That's what I had to do by myself. You know, I was sat down and I was showed feminist literature that was explaining to me that being a man is dangerous and the West is phallogocentric, logos and phallus centric. I was never explained why it was that way, why that was like healthy, why that was vital. Instead, I was just given the reactionary position to this. Very fascinating stuff. And so one immensely powerful and motivating and white-pilling and beautiful trend is it's basically like a counterculture, but it's got more force than anything I've ever seen, has woken up to this. Like a lot of people are like, no. You know, Tate is a perfect example. You know, one of the biggest people in the world was Trump. He was a big deal. Andrew Tate now is basically bigger or as big as Trump was. And he's representing a very dissident approach. And the entire male youth was like, yes. They were like, I am on board with this. You know, and does he believe everything I believe? No. Is he very artistic? Not really. Like, he doesn't have that in him. You know, that's not his sort of style. So will he lead to a cultural renaissance? I'm not sure. But the point is that his worldview really snapped a lot of people out. It's showing that people have an appetite for a different perspective, you know? And that's incredibly motivating and white-pilling. That's incredibly, like, it's almost like you're sitting in the middle of not punk rock, maybe hip-hop before it became the world paradigm. But I think it's even beyond that. Like, it might be a movement as big as modernism itself, you know? Like, it could be monumental in what it's turning into, because you have an entire group of some of the highest IQ people dropping out of mainstream institutions. They're actually getting pushed out of these mainstream institutions because of the lack of merit. They're now all gathering together, forming a collective mind. Just like in ancient Europe, you had the Catholics who created the Latin elite and got them all in the university system, got them to talk to each other. Out of that came alchemy, science, like, you know, all of Western culture came out of that. You see something very similar happening. Everybody's now formulating in these group spaces on the internet, interacting with each other, sharing these ideas. The best ideas truly are winning. Like the establishment are censoring people, but it's almost like the spirit can't be crushed. Like, people do think differently, and this is incredible. Like, this is going to lead somewhere profound. It's going to be a paradigm shift that we will struggle to understand. It's just going to be tough because this is so connected to the power structure that they're going to fight like, there'll be wars over this, I'd say. That's one white-pilling thing. A world war. Yeah, Stef, nice. The other one is the obsession about health. I think really, like, the gym culture and all that stuff, and the biohackers and all that, and like Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, and they're maybe normie representations of that. But, you know, like David Sinclair, Tony Robbins, Ray P. These characters are all becoming super prominent, and this is never, like, this Nietzsche would talk about this, like, he was almost like the first biohacker because he had this fucking weird disease where it was syphilis. Nietzsche, by the way, like, that was your problem, but he had all these health problems, and he had to biohack his way out of it and figure out how to eat, and he developed his, like, you know, niche, unique diet where he was very, very restrictive in what he ate. And he was always complaining, being like, you know, Western culture is very idealistic. It's very lost in it's like an unintegrated thinker. And we need to get back into the body. And science, natural, and he would, like, of course, blame Christianity for this and Platonism for this. He was like, Christianity and Platonism merged together to create this totally abstract, delusional philosophy, which pulled us completely out of the thing that matters, which is the body. And then going into the 20th century, this was a huge theme. And of course, it led to, like, all the talk from the eugenicists and all this type of stuff, and the beginning of the bodybuilders and the arrival of all that type of stuff. But what we see now is it manifests in, like, an incredibly interesting way, because technology has actually advanced so much in the last 100 years that you see these questions are finally getting a grip. Like, this is becoming a cultural paradigm. Like a lot of people talk about returning to Christianity, but I genuinely think that there's almost like a neo-pagan religion currently existing right now, which is this sort of biohacking, lifter, you know, bodybuilder thing. Like, it's people really struggle to understand this, but the Olympic Games were banned in Europe until I think it was like 1912. Like, we didn't have a conception of idealizing. Like, we live in basically like a sort of Greek society. in the old vision of like the Greco-Roman classical world, where there, like, people would show their bodies off and craft their bodies. Like, that stuff just didn't happen really in Christianity. And the whole God is dead thing, you know, terrible in some ways, but it did open up the boundaries for people to sort of start going back to physiques and developing themselves and developing their capacity for strength and grace and beauty and working in the bodies. And now we've got all this tech that's allowing us to like biohack and understand, you know, how a peptide works. We can use all the advancements of, like, you know, you can have just so much food, so much protein, so much milk. We're all bigger than we were a couple of generations ago. Like, the potential for this is fascinating. And I actually think things like the bugs, you know, the bug burgers, is actually almost like a shadow manifestation of this. It's almost like a boss character that the Western man will have to overcome if he wants to truly reap the fruits of this incredible opportunity that he has. Because it's almost like, and I mean super bullish here, it's almost like if we can really get the biohacking thing in place, we could start seeing genuine life extension, possibly even intelligence increasing, possibly even increasing of like things like, you know, with Ray Peat's conceptions, maybe the metabolism goes through the roof. And then we have people of super high energy, diseases start to fall. We get like, we really mitigate the last man instincts within us. And, you know, like, again, I think this is such a big deal when you look at, I'll say, the 2 years of indoor prison. You look at that, and you sort of understand that that was actually almost like a negating manifestation of many of these potentials, because you had the worst instincts, the complacency within man, decide that I'm going to have this really authoritarian imposition of medicine upon myself for safety. And the flip of that is that you have all these really intelligent individuals with a unified, strong self-identity and creative spirit, utilizing all these incredible possibilities of medicine and sovereignty and reliance, so that obviously they're eating smart and stuff like this and taking care of themselves, to extend their capacities, to turn themselves into ubermensch, you know. And you could start to see then life extension, higher, faster metabolisms. This would lead to more intelligence, maybe even genetic improvements in intelligence, all these type of things. And you see growing out of that like a super race, like a race that might not have ever been seen in mankind before. And I think that is, I would call that the Promethean harvest of Western civilization and the manifestation of Western man to the next step. Like he could genuinely achieve that. And that possibility is so easy to see. It's so easy to see. You just go on Twitter and it's there. It's right in front of you. People are talking about this stuff and people are very interested in this stuff. And it's real. And like, I don't think people understand how unique that is. That was not there 100 years ago. That was impossible to conceive of 100 years ago. When Nietzsche talked about this stuff, like, it was like just talking about cooking meats different. But now we're at a whole different level, you know. So there's that. And I guess I'm trying to think of the last stuff. Is there a third? The rule of threes is always nice, so I'm trying to think of a third one.
Right.
Like, I guess it's sort of related to the first in some sense. But I guess there's something like Western man specifically has gone through a very, very deep demoralization experience of the last 100 years. The God is dead thing combined with the kind of choice that we decided to go forward with society. And I then genuinely think he's really, really waking up. And like, we are waking up, you could say. And this leads us to a destiny. This leads us to be able to say to ourselves, we're going to create something new. We're going to create a destiny. The way I often phrase this when I'm talking to the boyos on Uberboyo is, when Rome fell, it was a tragedy for Rome. And it was so weird, but like, Christianity would have appeared like the way the woke movement appears now, where like all the women and the disenfranchised ethnic people, you know, it's a very strong statement, but Rome had like greedy people who took in a load of slaves because they didn't want to work. And then these immigrants and women all gathered together and they found an identity in Christianity. And it's sort of similar now. Like, you see this sort of capitalist instinct is like, oh, just bring everybody into the West. And everybody in the West is just confused. And they're like, look at England right now. There's like all these ethnicities fighting against each other. And it's chaos and the identities are just getting pulled apart. And Western man sits in the middle of it and sort of like, who the fuck am I? Like, what am I doing? Like, he's looking around his society and he's like, this is what am I doing? Like, they're pulling down, they hate everything about me. And the people who are the Western people who apparently I represent are all just like, they're just weird. They're Redditors. Like, what is going on? And it's almost like these brutal stimulants are going to make us lose something. Like, we might even lose entire potentials out of entire nations and stuff like this. But it will, and maybe many of the beliefs that we had about having been able to live these free, open, liberal societies, which is a beautiful idea and would be amazing if we could achieve it. We're going to lose that. That's just not going to happen. And we're going to get like the harshest slap you could ever get, you know, and we're going to start to inform ourselves about like what exactly mistakes we made. And it's going to lead to a new perspective that becomes a vital creative possibility for the future. It leads to a new way of looking at ourselves that allows us to actually get serious and start to do the hard work of building something and standing on our own 2 feet and saying, what do we represent? And you could put it this way. We find a new identity, like maybe that Promethean vision of ourselves that actually is fertile and real. Because right now we have a demoralizing identity. Our identity is, it's like essentially cuckoldry, you know? It's like, let's sacrifice to the West, to the delusions and narcissisms of Reddit moderators and the salvation of you know, people who are like, you know, getting exploited by orgs and stuff like this. It's like, you know, it's just and obviously you can see the postmodern culture that comes out of that is sterile, lifeless, dead. But imagine if all that could flip in its head a bit and we could start to believe in ourselves again. And, you know, maybe you get wrapped up with like going to Mars or whatever way it manifests. But that would be like fertile, a cultural possibility. You know, that would be amazing. That would mean you meet so many artists nowadays who are just fucking, they're like they're in the Soviet Union, just want to blow their brains out because they're, and me even a little bit, you know, it's like, I would have loved nothing more than just go to Hollywood and try make it in the music scene. But that, like, you can't make movies these days because it's all propaganda. You know, you can't do any of that stuff. But imagine when it comes to the point where these type of creatives are able to stand on a paradigm that they believe in, and then we can have all these intelligent young guys apply their creativity to principles that they believe in, and you can start to see the art that is produced out of that. Like, that would be just, that's just going to be blistering when it happens. You know, it's going to be insane, but it's just not here yet.
So like in summary, there's going to be a burgeoning warrior class of vital artistic biohackers that are going to reclaim the culture.
Yeah, well, yeah. Put it in short, man. There's the tagline, I guess. Imagine if Beethoven was jacked and lived for 250 years. There you go.
Yeah.
And he
Thanks
made
so much for
techno.
this conversation. Is there anything you wanna plug or direct people to?
You can check out my YouTube channel. I think it'd be the best, but I'll share this if it's up on YouTube. And boyos, if you're listening, give Daniel here a follow. So if any of you scallywags are listening up to this one, as I said, give Daniel a follow and we'll chat. So thank you very much, sir.